Dear President Trump, thank you for watching this video. If you actually got it, because I'm going to tweet this out to you. I wanted to try something new and bold, and dare I say revolutionary. I want to write a healthcare bill live in real time. Now, this is just going to be a first draft. Okay, this is going to be a first draft, and but I know we could solve this problem. And unfortunately, many of I'm going to try to keep this clean. It's difficult for me because I usually like to curse quite a bit. I'm going to keep this clean. Many of the let's just say politicians right now, and many who I thought I liked. Look, I thought I liked Paul Ryan. But there's a problem. I don't understand why they're making it so difficult to finally make healthcare affordable for all of us. And it's not that difficult. Okay. And now I know you're busy. I'm going to try to see, if you want, maybe Jared Kushner could pick up on this. Okay. Or Ivanka Trump. I know she's your right hand man, so to speak, but no, but not Donald Trump Jr. I'm sorry. I don't want him anywhere near these documents. Okay. Now that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start. I'm going to do a screen share. I'm going to get this one right over here. Actually, let me first open up the document because, like I'm telling you, this is going to be live. I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to get this done, and it probably won't get solved on this first time around. Like I said, this is going to be a first draft. But anyway, look, here's how I think we need to solve healthcare. Okay, let me make this a little larger for anyone watching, and especially if the deep state is watching this right now, like the CIA or the NSA or the FBI. Hey, I'm not doing anything illegal. I should have every right to be able to tweet the president a YouTube video that tries to solve this problem that affects us all. Okay. Here's, in my opinion, and not even in my opinion. I mean, this is just a fact because I've been doing quite a bit of research, okay, on Google and Wikipedia and stuff. But look, I'm telling you, it's not that difficult to do. The first problem that we have is the waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm going to put it in all caps. That's the first thing we need to deal with, because if I'm not mistaken, for example, Medicaid alone spends like about 500 billion per year. Those are the costs of Medicaid, and that's not even including Medicare. It's probably, I think, at another, let's just round it off to 500 billion, okay, per year. That's $1 trillion already. That's just being wasted, and I know, I am almost certain that probably out of that $1 trillion, I'm gonna be even conservative. 25% of that is waste, fraud, and abuse. Okay, we need to do something about that. That's the first thing we really need to focus on. Now, after that, the next problem. By the way, I would hope that for anybody watching this, see, it's one thing to just talk and talk and talk, and that's all these talking heads, that's all they do. They just talk. But rarely do you see the outline, and rarely do you see it built. Again, this is a first draft. I haven't even saved this. Let me save this. Browse. Just put it on the old desktop over here. Please don't notice all my, oh, geez, whatever. You know what? I'm just going to call it waste for now. I don't want to spend too much time with all my files up there. Okay, look. I am dead serious. I hope somebody in the deep state at the very least is watching this. Or let me see how many people are watching. Okay, I've got 5 viewers. At least 5 other viewers are watching this. Let me go check and see who's watching this right now. By the way, I just read this today. This is a problem. Look, this is one of the biggest problems that we're having, not that offer of unlimited time from Sprint. This, lawmakers halt bill to let VA doctors prescribe pot for pain. What is wrong with you? I'm not going to curse. I'm not going to curse. Sorry about the car in the background. Why? Why? And it's, of course, who is it? Republican lawmakers. By the way, I'm not a Democrat. No, hell's no. Okay, I consider myself an independent. Right? I don't know if I would go so far as to say I'm a centrist. I mean, I like to think I'm a centrist. I'm definitely socially liberal, fiscally conservative. And I think there are certain issues where it's not a matter of being in the center. There are certain issues where you have to, I guess, for the lack of better terms, left or right. Look, I'm very socially liberal, so I'm very quote unquote to the left when it comes to this, when it comes to marijuana. I mean, the legalization, outright legalization of marijuana. Why is this still an issue? Let me write this down in the my little thing here. Oh my God, legalizing marijuana. That's another one that we have to do. And in that sense, you know what? I think it's a good idea. If you want to fire Jeff Sessions, since he's really anti-marijuana, I don't mind seeing him go. I know there's a lot of people on the right now. Okay, it's on Breitbart, Tucker Carlson, all these people are having a problem with Jeff Sessions. Hey, you know what? If you're that anti-marijuana, as far as I'm concerned, see you later. Okay. Well, by the way, let me get to whoever's watching this. I'm curious to see what are the. And this one, by the way, I'm sorry. I had this little tab up because I love listening to, because especially this is from McClatchy. Okay, McClatchy. And I love hearing Donald Trump say McClatchy. I love it. Just one more time. Let me get the full one.
Blumenthal sent McClatchy.
One more time.
Sent McClatchy.
Okay, anyway, that joke has already run its course. Let me come over here to my channel. And let me see. Oh my God, wait a second. Am I not live? I thought I was live. Yes, I am live. Here we go. Okay, let me mute myself. Let me see who's up here. Cool. All right, so we've got Obvious Deal Frieder. What's up? MC. All right, so cool, man. Sessions is not the issue. The law is. Okay, look, that sounds so profound that I am going to invite you in. Let's let me invite. I'm going to invite the first 5 viewers. That's it. Only you guys come in on this. Here's the invite. By the way, for anyone who is wondering, again, I close this. For anyone who's wondering, oh wait, am I not presenting anymore? What's going on here? I want to present screen 2. Share. Present to everyone. All right, let me see what I've done. Anyway, okay. All right. For anyone who's wondering what I'm doing, I'm going to tweet this video to President Trump. It's weird. Every time I say even President Trump, I have a slight moment of cognitive dissonance doing that. Hey, what's up? Who's this?
Hello.
Tweet this video. Yeah, how's it going? Endor Born.
Okay, sorry, I accidentally muted myself. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's
All
up,
right, cool. This is actually the first stream that I've caught while it's happening, so yay.
Yeah, cool, man. Welcome in. Welcome aboard, I guess. And what's up, MC? Look, I actually have MC. I've got your file up over here. Let me bring it.
Welcome. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can definitely hear you.
Yay! I fixed the mic temporarily, anyway.
Hello, Nachi. I might
What up, Bob?
myself just because parents walk in. So if that happens,
Oh, that's cool, man. Let me just check some of the comments over here. Anything I might have missed out on? Okay, so it looks like the sound is good and everything. Look, here's what I'm going to do. Like I said, I want to single-handedly solve the healthcare crisis in the United States every other week with these live streams. And I want to start one first draft article or one first draft document that addresses this. Like I said, I'm gonna tweet this out to President Trump. Every single one of these live streams, I'm gonna tweet it to the president until somebody over there listens to this. Okay? So anyway, I think the first problem we need to tackle is a waste, fraud, and abuse. Because I think with this alone, we could probably have single payer without raising taxes on people. What do you guys think?
I'm actually in favor of single payer. I looked this up recently. Basically, I went in, and I did this a while ago, and I don't have any sources on hand, but I could maybe go look them up if anyone's interested. I went in and I looked up the price of, because one idea that I had basically set up if you look at the amount that the federal government pays, that's obviously a lot, but also the individual states do pay a lot to Medicare, Medicaid themselves. So I don't know, it just went through my mind one day, how much could you get done, how much could you pay for with that as well? And I figured out that if we set up a system, assuming that there was no savings, assuming that the amount that is paid in Medicare for the oldest of the population, people 65 and up, which I think it covers about 15% of the population. I'm rambling, I'm sorry. But basically, I threw some calculations and I figured out that Medicare, at least in its most basic form, Medicare Type A plus prescription medications, which is just basic doctor services, basic nursing services, and giving out prescription medication, the bare necessities, would cost about, I think in 2016, costed about $250 billion across the entirety of who was covered. And simply, granted, all I did was multiply this by about 7 to grow this up to the entire population from 15% to over 100%. But I think it came out to some number like 1.7 trillion, which, while is a lot, that's before you account for any savings. That's assuming that random 15-year-olds are going to use as much medication as 65-year-olds. And it is technically affordable. It does require tax raising, so it does require the taxes go up. So if you actually do account for savings, and if you do get a more realistic projection, I think you could very easily afford it. Coming roundabout to just say nothing at all.
Right.
I'm sorry if I ramble. This is the first time I've...
That's the good thing. It's, everything gets captured and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm starting to realize, though, from the little bit that I'm, researching this and stuff, I'm wondering, man, if healthcare is the type of thing that it's so expensive as it is to cover that. It apparently it can't just be covered privately alone. There's always going to be a need for subsidies, apparently. And so I was wondering if, like, here's another one. Another thing that I was going to have here was going to be if we could have single payer, but like a very basic, basic single payer for all, which would pretty much be what they were. I remember, I think they called it the Medicare option. It would be through vouchers. So you get the best of all these. You get the single payer, so at the very least, no one has to worry about going broke, okay? Especially over like chemotherapy and stuff like that. But yet you have it as an option. You have that one government option, and that's where health insurance companies can still be in the game. Because I think one of the things that the health insurance companies are trying to do is obviously they don't want to be driven out of the market. They don't want to be put out of business, and it wouldn't be a good idea either. Because obviously we have a lot of unemployed people. Those unemployed people that didn't be absorbed by the government. We had a very basic single payer that everyone is covered with. Okay, and everyone, no matter what, if you don't have insurance, you've got this. However, it's going to have wait times. It's not going to be the best of service. You're never going to get your private rooms at a hospital, for example. And it's only going to cover like catastrophic, like things like that. Like if you have cancer, you have, conditions that are beyond all the pre-existing conditions that most health insurance companies don't want to deal with. That's what the government would cover. And again, it covers it as an option. So for example, let's say I'm like, you know what? I don't want that. I'd rather pay a private insurance company And then if you present you do your taxes at the end of the year, and you're like, hey, look, I've actually been paying for health insurance privately. Can I get a tax break on the fact that I did not use the single payer? I think we could do something like that.
See, I'm getting conflicting reports. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm getting conflicting reports. I'm reading up on the single payer in California because apparently they're trying to pass that, or I don't know if they have yet. But one source is saying it's going to cost $400 billion to implement it, not to how much it's going to cost to actually run it. But some sources are saying it's going to be like $400 billion just for them to get it up and running. It's Senate Bill 56-2. And other ones are claiming it's going to save businesses money somehow. But, I mean, if it's going to be $400 billion just to set it up, right. And, I mean, on the low end, $331 billion, and they're claiming it's only going to save $37 billion a year, that would mean that it would take, I don't know, well over a decade to get that money back, just to set it up.
Now, that's what the... that would be up to the California residents, right? That's $400 billion that California residents are stuck with, or are they expecting the entire country to pay for this?
That's where I'm getting conflicting reports. Some of it says that it's going to be paid for by the Californians, and some of it's going to be subsidized via federal, like a block.
Right, so whatever they get in block grants as it is, they would use it for that?
My question is, where are they going to get the money?
No, and that's the other thing. I'd also love to understand what exactly do they mean by single payer? Because I get the feeling like they're really looking at socializing this. I would almost be willing to bet.
Let's see here.
I will say one thing, Nachi.
Yep.
What you're referring to when you say you leave it as an option, I think that is more usually referred to as. I don't think that's referred to as single payer. When people say single payer, they are almost always, at least I'm generally more like left wing, and I kind of hang around more left wing parts of YouTube. Generally, when I hear people talk about single payer, they are specifically referring to socializing it.
Yeah, and I'm starting to now that because I've actually heard it. I've heard it defined by even some people, like Vox, for example, which I can't stand Vox. But every once in a while, I'll listen. I'll listen to what they have to say. I'll give them a chance. And even they themselves describe single payer as all it is the government is paying out the providers. In other words, the providers are still private. You could still have private hospitals and private doctors. You can still have these little MD clinics like the one I have here in my neighborhood, and everything can be privatized. You could still have private services and private, products, MRI machines, because we need that. That's what scares me about the Bernie Sanders types.
Okay, yeah. So I'm on the healthycaliforniaact.org website, I guess, is the people promoting it. Right. It essentially is Medicaid for all. They're selling it as a universal Medicaid that everybody in the wonderful state of California would get. And you just...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what they're labeling this as. It would be basically everybody would have the same Medicaid coverage. And I guess, like, your taxes would just support this somehow.
I've never really I'm not sure how I feel about the idea of Medicaid for all. Like I said earlier, I am in favor of a sort of, very similar to what Nachi was saying, a sort of basic coverage for everyone, and then individual states could come in and say, okay, we want to expand this coverage, or, like, let's say California, we want to expand it to be unbelievably, to cover pretty much everything from dentistry to buying toothpaste or something like that, or buying a leave, and then a state like Texas wants to just leave all that to the free market. The problem with Medicare for all is I almost feel like Medicare itself covers too much to be affordable on that level.
Yeah, here's the problem I have with this. They're selling it as, and especially in a state like California, where you have a very large population of illegal and potentially either the working poor or people that are, well, they're worse off than even, there's just people that are very financially disenfranchised, or they're just illegal. And they're basically saying that if you live in California, you'll get medical benefits automatically. Like just Medicaid for everybody who lives there. And California is notorious for giving benefits and driver's license and, frankly, rights to people that are non-citizens. Well, I'll be back.
No problem.
See ya. By the way, hello, person who just came in.
Hey, how's
Hello.
it going? Back.
Hello, good.
And I'm sorry, I'm typing out now. I guess you guys can see it, especially whatever private insurance.
One conclusion that I've kind of come to in my own look at this is, I guess it's the nature of incentives. The reason that the private incentive works so well with 95, 99% of all services is because I guess you should say that want is limited. I want a new iPhone. I want something, but I don't need it. The problem with certain extreme medical conditions and just medical conditions in general is when you just had a car crash, you don't want to get help. When you just realize that you have a serious disease, you don't want to get help. You need it. And therefore, because want is infinite, because want is infinite, because demand is infinite, the price can just skyrocket anywhere. It doesn't matter what supply is. Well, to a certain extent it does. But because demand is ever growing and essentially limitless, you can just set the price wherever you want and it will be paid.
This website sucks. Sorry to interrupt. I'm reading their propaganda website, and it's basically just a whole bunch of, well, they just have like a bunch of, you got the brown guy, the white guy, the Indian, the Muslim, the Mexican, and they're all holding up signs and holding hands, and I'm sure there's somebody giving out a Pepsi.
Did we check
Terrible.
guys? Did we check everyone off the list?
See, I'm going to interject here because I really disagree with the idea of single payer. I would prefer this. All right, I would prefer that if we're going to look at this from a catastrophic standpoint, that the government set up specific clinics, all right, for like cancer, for cancer treatment. All right, and that it is government run and totally funded by the government. And you can go in there and apply to see whether or not you'll be allowed in or not, depending on, and they can use whatever criteria they want to determine whether or not you should be allowed in or not. This way, you're not having an overall taxation issue because it's just another government program. Yes, it would be the government competing with private industry in a certain regard, but you could also then help supplement that with ways of going, okay, the people that are going to be in here doing diagnosis are going to be individuals and doctors who are in college yet, who are getting degrees, that this is an internship, that this is something that they need to provide.
I think you could still have like what you're describing that would be government run. Actually, I would think those would be private companies or private hospitals, whatever. But
well, you would still have those private areas, right? You would still have the areas that are private, all right, but you would have the clinics. And also, in addition to this, when you start talking about these conditions, all right, the problem with that is that what's a condition isn't the same for everybody. What's a need for someone for something is not broad enough for everybody. All right, so this way, the government, we could start something from a clinical perspective that's very narrow in scope, per se, right? And then see how well and how effective it is, and tweak it and then expand it or shrink it depending upon its effectiveness.
So basically set up what would essentially be a public option with a very narrow perspective of what it covers. And then if it works really well, we could maybe expand that, tweak that, whatever.
Right, a very narrow perspective of who anybody can apply. You make it so that anybody can apply, but acceptance is determined by several criteria that's run by the government.
I wonder if you could solve that through vouchers.
Explain vouchers to me in general, because I've heard that term thrown around both in terms of like education and healthcare and stuff like that, mainly with your videos as far as healthcare is concerned. But still, I've never, from neither side, have I ever gotten a concrete definition of what it really is.
Well, vouchers. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll take a crack at explaining it. The voucher system, which is what they've been trying to implement through education, and you even get quite a few Democrats. I'll never forget seeing that whole union of Al Sharpton and Newt Gingrich trying to come together on this, right? Where you basically have private schools competing against public schools, especially the failing public schools. And how do the parents pay for it? By giving them vouchers. Now, granted, it ends up there's a lot of controversy, and especially for people.
I took an entire class on this.
Sorry?
I took an entire class on this. It's called.
Okay, okay, go ahead. You want to explain it?
Yeah. All right.
That's
So
really good.
before we get into the voucher program specifically, which Mike Pence and Betsy DeVos's home states implement, we got to understand what public and private schools are. So public schools are schools that are subsidized by your tax dollars. Obviously, private schools are stuff that people have to pay out of pocket. Now, charter schools are nonprofit and profit, but they are publicly funded. And a lot of these states with vouchers and school choice, where Betsy DeVos is from, have a lot of for-profit charter schools. So that is where the controversy comes in. But there are states like Indiana and whatever Betsy DeVos's home state is, I believe Michigan and Louisiana, that have very unregulated charters. It's almost like the rise of the 19th century capitalism as far as charter school education goes. And then you have schools that have really well-regulated charters like Massachusetts and many of the New England states.
And I think the other problem with Betsy DeVos, like I didn't see a problem with her, like when there was such a controversy, like at the beginning, I think the ending of last year, the beginning of this year. I think it was at the beginning of this year when she was really in the news. At first,
pretty much right when she was getting chosen.
Yeah, when she was getting affirmed, because there's your senators approve or disapprove of your president's cabinet members.
And they were giving her, especially Al Franken was trying to give her such a hard time. But then I started realizing, I think I see the reason why they were giving her a hard time, and I would almost agree because of the religiosity.
Well, not only the fact that she, I think at one point, may or may have not funded gay conversion therapy, that can't be confirmed, and is part of the for-profit charter sector.
Right.
That's where the issue comes in. Now that is what charter schools look like today, but the original purpose of charter schools were to give an exception to build maybe one or a very few amount per state, to give low regulation, to give more wiggle room where schools can find new ways to educate kids that they can eventually implement in the main schools. It was a good idea on paper, but it was never well regulated or thought through. And there are a lot of studies that show in these low regulated charter school states that people lose up to a third of a year in math. Or no, my apologies. I've lose several days in math and reading every year, and at best do the same. So there's a lot of surveys that say, hey, these for-profit schools turns out to do worse, and also they're taking money out of the schools that need it most, which disproportionately tend to be these schools that are struggling to make ends meet anyway. Because
but the advantage is that they're that much cheaper.
not really, they're not that much cheaper.
The states have a significant savings, which is why they allow charter schools. They have charter schools in the state that I'm in, and their biggest advantage is that because of the lack of overhead for the schools, that they don't have to sit up there and the cost of a teacher, which is basically the same. All right.
What state are you from? My apologies.
I'm in Arizona.
Arizona, yes. In Arizona, it does save money, but in a lot of other states, it really doesn't, which is part of the issue. And also the fact that they're for-profit, people are very against, because education is supposed to be this thing that everybody has, this, they'll write that Dwight D. Eisenhower sign.
Well,
So,
let's
get back to health.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt. I was going to bring up.
I'm sorry that drove us off point.
No, that's cool.
Not to interrupt. I was going to bring up on this again because California seems to be the second state to try this Medicaid for all. And I'm reading this article. First, I'd like to say hi, Boo. It's a friend of mine that's watching. Second, apparently Vermont abandoned the effort in 2014 because of a huge projected cost. And then California, I'm reading the LA Times article, they brought up a really good point, which was they weren't sure how to keep people from becoming flooding to the state just to get free medical.
Okay, that's another thing that I was going to put down here is we need to stop being so generous with immigrants and illegal. That would affect my family because I've got obviously, don't worry for any of my cousins that might be watching this. I'm not going to mention any names or social security numbers. But I've heard of some of the benefits that certain people get, and I'm like, what? And these are people that are like, I'm not going to say fresh off the boat, but I'm like, wow, you have barely contributed to the tax paying base of this country, and already you're getting like a bunch of free care that I don't even have access to. That's a problem.
At bare minimum, I would say you have to at least have been a citizen for maybe 2-3 years before you can.
Yeah, but that's racist.
Oh, please, you're not the first person to call me a racist.
Yeah, but that's the exact argument. The whole thing is going to turn into this. You're immediately going to have California to sign in Medicaid for all. Then when it bankrupts the state beyond its already levels of bankruptcy, the first thing you're going to hear is, well, maybe we shouldn't give it to all the illegals. And then you're going to have riots, and then you're going to have people saying, well, it's because you're being racist against them.
Well, we already have those left-wing riots,
what'll happen
but that's
with
another tree.
This is my problem with any kind of single payer, is that at some point in time, because government can't do anything cheaply, and it's demonstrated that on a repeated basis.
Australia has managed to do it successfully, but
I would argue that our government cannot do anything cheaply, and I do want to make that distinction. The reason that our government cannot do anything cheaply is because it's not nearly democratic enough. It's not nearly democratic enough.
The reason we can't do it cheaply, there's a lot of reasons, not the least of which is our society is considerably different.
Well, also, our government is not designed to be run.
But either way,
that capacity.
I think it's foolish to assume that it's not gonna go up and up.
Oh, it will definitely go up, but the goal is not to stop it from going up at all. The goal is to make it go up less than the amount that GDP per capita is rising.
But once again, if you're going to do something like that, you're going to have to sit up there and take a look at his first line, fraud, waste, and abuse. And in the fraud, waste, and abuse section, I think you cannot understate that government regulations, ridiculous government regulations, add billions and billions of dollars to that goes nowhere except to the bureaucracy. It doesn't go to the person given the health care. It doesn't go to the patient getting the health care. It goes to a funded bureaucracy. And if you're not going to sit up there and take a look at that, and if you're going to have any kind of governmental body involved in this is why I think it's better to set up certain government-run clinics, all right, that do certain things for catastrophic health care, because then you can watch this quite a bit easier rather than worry about trying to do an overall governmental management in every little area, trying to figure out, okay, where's the fraud, waste, and abuse. The additional thing is by having clinics like that is the clinics, if they're done correctly, and it doesn't have to necessarily be done at the federal level per se, but it can be done at the state level, is they can make decisions, all right, that make sense for the area that they're in versus overall broad cookie cutter, one shot only solutions to this.
Well, there does have to be some limit to that.
Also, I agree.
Just cut in really quick to counter what MC is saying. It's interesting that you think that government can't do anything right, and yet you would be open to the idea of having government-run clinics. What I would propose is allow private businesses to open up those clinics, and people would pay for them via vouchers.
The problem with that is the how do you sit up there and manage the abuse? How do you manage the fraud? Because it gets out of control. We're already doing that with Medicare and Medicaid, and look at all the fraud, waste, and abuse in there.
Well, a lot of the fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid comes from the fact that the people who are managing it are also getting paid off by the people who benefit from the fraud, waste, and abuse. Which no matter what you're talking about, I feel like that has to be worked out.
I think that could be worked out, especially if, like here, I even put this little idea in here where, for example, you could incentivize the people to shop around with their vouchers. So in other words, so that they don't keep going to the same place, or that one place doesn't get preference, and you still keep competition within the private end of the providers. You have the people with the vouchers. Let's say that they have that, that very basic single payer, right?
If we go to that type of a thing, though, Nachi, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but what you're leaving open-ended is when people don't use the voucher correctly or make bad decisions. Are you willing to tell people who made bad decisions and screwed themselves up and are still suffering, I'm sorry, but you screwed up, and walk away from them?
Especially, and I'm generally in favor of the kind of thing you're pointing out, but I will agree with that statement. Especially, like, let's say the bad decision wasn't necessarily their fault. Let's just say they got bad information and made great decisions off of bad information. They're basically screwed at no fault of their own, and what that's the reason I would say that we should just how about this? I'm looking for a word. We should probably just go ahead and pay outright for any just go ahead and pay outright for any services. Giving a limited number of vouchers, I feel like that could open up a serious problem.
Well, I do agree that maybe the services should.
If you go that route, then basically what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put central control of costs. Well, and as soon as you do that, you open up
clinics too. That would have to be done in your clinic.
Which is another thing. Thanks for reminding me. A price transparency, and that would be something. By the way, if I can only hope that a bunch of other people end up watching this. I am surprised that there is not right now like a website, like, and not run by the government, like a private website that has a list of all the standardized prices of what things should be, and again.
Well, how do you define should be? Like, I could probably, I'm not sure. I could probably easily go Google what prices are in different countries and see how much profit they make.
I would like to say that I'm surprised the Huffington Post is against universal vouchers. Like, I was looking at the article on vouchers. Apparently,
why would that surprise you?
Because it's the Huffington Post.
No, I can see why. Because chances are the people who they're trying to cater to more government and more government unions and all that. Because they see the vouchers for healthcare the way they see the vouchers for schools. And then that's where, I'm sorry, I got a helicopter in the background. That's where We just let it pass. That's where you do have to have some regulations, and I especially not to get sidetracked, but coming back to the schools, the problems that you see with schools in certain states, these charter schools that are not good enough, chances are it's because they're probably trying to get away with no regulations whatsoever. There's got to be some regulations. You have to have, like, that's something that I'm starting to learn the more I get into all this stuff. It's really shattering a lot of my preconceived libertarian notions. You know, I think there's a natural push and pull between basically what would be communism and what would be outright anarchy. I can see why that is there, and I can see why this is not getting resolved between collectivism and individuality.
Well, and that's another reason why I think that having clinics give you will give people a lot of options. Plus, people can easily see and manage it. That's why. So if there's certain things that the catastrophic clinic is able to do, all right, and you can also see what the effects are going to be on the marketplace itself. Right, because if you go to a single payer system where everything is paid directly, regardless, 100% single payer system. Oh, get rid of that. All right, if you go to a 100% single payer system, all right, you're going to have some kind of centralized medical, control from the government dictating this is what it's going to be. This is what we're going to pay. This is what a doctor is going to cost. This is how much we're going to pay for this doctor, for this procedure. This is what we're going to hire you at. And they're going to have to seize total control of the entire process, all right, from the point of view of when they go to college, all right, what it takes to get a degree, how qualified you have to be. All those things are going to have to be rolled into, all right, some kind of central planning.
Well, right? How would you avoid that in your clinic system? Because you said that
I can tell you how you can implement price ceilings on doctors' salaries. Because I feel like with a lot of doctors these days in certain specialties that are way too common, because they have so much control on their price and their service, they can arbitrarily decide some sort of salary, which is ridiculous. And I feel like if we put price ceilings on doctors, we'd get more people that want to be in it for the civil servant side of things rather than, doctor money.
Well, that's exactly like in the clinics that I'm talking about. One of the things you could do is you can have local deals made with the universities to where their interns, right, can serve in these clinics for points and for other things, and their rates of pay will be significantly reduced. All right, but you can use that as part of a certification process of saying, okay, you've served your time so many hours of clinic service for whatever it is, right? And then you get your private license then can be applied for.
Well, they kind of have that with residency, but it's not working. I think you need and I'm a libertarian when I say this, but you need a price ceiling on doctors' salaries.
Well, but see, the reason it's not working, the reason it's not working right now, though, the reason it's not working right now, though, is because that is controlled by the AMA, and they're doing it for one specific reason, and that is to limit the number of doctors available because they don't want to lose their specialty. They don't want simple little things from coming in there that could take away their high-paying salaries.
Well,
away.
yeah.
So they've created a guild. So they created a guild type of system. In this case, though, with a government-run situation that's managing this like this, the AMA would be cut out of that. That guild system would become less and less effective.
Well, take away the funnel.
I still wonder how you would. Again, there's doctors. What doctors make, but what about in terms of the cost of procedures? Again, if the government is flipping, like let's say I need to go get chemotherapy in one of these catastrophic clinics.
Not to interrupt, I didn't know if Nachi could tell, when you guys are on the stream, is it showing the pictures of the people who are talking, or is it still freezing out?
No, I'm going to check what it is, but I think right now, like I've been just keeping up the document. The document is what I've been keeping up.
Yeah, I'm seeing the document too.
You know, and I kind of want to keep it that way because I would rather be showing that, and then of course every once in a while if I'm toggling between screens, you know, you'll see the actual thing, but I'm trying to keep the this document up, you know, because this is what I want to be able to build. And I know it sounds like I'm doing it as a joke, but I'm dead serious. I would love to see if, you know, over time you could actually come up with something. Because, dude, here's the other amazing thing. Obamacare was what? It was rolled out in 2010, and this is a very interesting what do you call it, criticism that's very valid, a very valid criticism. Dude, Republicans, and I don't want to get into the whole left-right Democrat Republican bullshit, but it is true. Republicans have had 7 years to already have a plan. Like they should have been ready. Like, hey, listen, if we get a Republican president coming in, this is what's going to replace and repeal Obamacare. I'm amazed they don't fucking have that. Like, what the fuck are they doing?
Well, it's like the budget. They kick it down, they kick the can down and wait till the last minute.
You know, and it's amazing. And I'm even hearing people on the right, people like Ben Shapiro, people like, well, Stephen Greer.
I would disagree with you a little bit with that, those people who are saying that. You got to remember, all right, the Republicans, when you say the Republicans could have had X, Y, and Z, there's a difference in the size of the majorities. All right.
That's true.
And that makes a significant difference when you come back and say, okay, we got a process. All right. And you have, what's more is that at that time period in 2010, the Democrats still dominated both houses of Congress. It wasn't until 2012 where the Republicans took control of the House, and it wasn't until 2014 until they took control of the House and the Senate. So to say that it was 7 years, I think is a bit of a misnomer.
But nonetheless,
well, still, they had time to be planning something. Like, even if it was just conceptual, like they had nothing.
And I think I know why. Because each one of them is trying to protect somebody's interests. Like, I would love to know exactly who Paul Ryan is trying to protect with his inability to come up with something that should have been replacing and repealing Obamacare. You know, or the same thing with Mitch McConnell. Like, now all of a sudden, Mitch McConnell, from the little bit that I know, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm an expert or anything, but I'm trying to protect myself because it affects me. I'm like surprised. Like, why is this such a huge issue? You know what I mean? And clearly, the reason being is because there's all these private interests that they're trying to protect. All these lobbyists that are making sure that if they want to get reelected and they want to have money for their reelection, don't sign such and such.
Well, and that's why I would also like to see this removed from the federal level and put back onto the states.
Well, I think that's just kind of band-aid. That's just putting a band-aid on the real problem.
Well,
again, the federal government could be a very, not very efficient, but a relatively efficient entity if it was only meant to be responsive to the will of the people. The problem is it's meant to be responsive to, first, the will of their donors, second, the will of the people.
Well,
and that's only if they don't conflict with the donors.
But when you got a federal government involved, all right, you're further removed from the populace, from a representation standpoint, and also from a bureaucratic standpoint. The bureaucrats that end up making a lot of these rules and making a lot of these decisions, they don't live anywhere near me, right? Whereas if they're somewhere in the state that I'm in, they're a lot closer. They're people that know me. There's people that understand the situation around me. It isn't a perfect system. I don't think that we're going to come out with a perfect system here. What we're looking for is something that works.
Well, I know. I will grant you that, yes, someone who lives within your state is probably much more likely to know what influences you. However, I feel like the federal government, the thing you said about representation, there is no reason why they should be any farther divided from you, representative in a representative sense, because you vote directly for your congressman. You vote directly.
Right, I don't vote for the bureaucrat. All right, that's hired by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
That is fair enough. But you would, in the same light, you wouldn't vote for the bureaucrat that's hired by the state government either.
She's been on
Correct,
one
but
lately.
that bureaucrat is living in my state and understands my state's needs a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, Maggie.
You know, on the other side of the country.
I don't know. I'm from Texas, and I have so much in common with someone from, let's say, El Paso or even Dallas, that they might as well be in a different state from me.
That's probably true, but then again, you guys have the option of forming what, 5 states?
Yeah.
So
It's like 4 or 5 or something like that, and I honestly do wish we would do it because it would be so much more representative.
Yeah,
it would just be so much better.
Timed out.
Like this, in Texas, the state government is about as far removed from me as the federal government is, so I'm kind of jaded to the subject.
Well, Texas is actually doing well convincing companies to move into their state. But as far as the locals that have lived there longer, I could see that.
Yeah.
So they're setting themselves up well, but because of that, they're getting a huge influx of people as this like rebirth of a land of opportunity, like in Houston and stuff.
And it is working. Like I can drive around. I can drive around and I can see huge economic booms. And in general, I don't dislike, at least on the economic sense, what the state is doing. There's a reason that even when I brought it up, I was like, okay, we should cover the basics, but then leave it up to the states, because I would rather everything that's not absolutely needed by the individual, I would rather that be covered by the private market, or at least give the states the option to cover that with the private market. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just because of the way elections are done. But I don't feel like I am represented at all by my state government. I feel like I'm represented more by the federal government than my state government, and that's a stretch because I don't really feel like I'm represented by that.
I have a feeling that you're the exception that proves the rule.
I might be. I'm not opposed to that possibility in any way, shape, or form. I will say this much, though. I would be surprised, because I talk politics with people all the time, I would be surprised if I met someone who could name who represents them in whatever their state legislator is.
Your local state ward person?
Yeah. Because I don't know mine, and I pay a lot of attention to politics. And one thing that I really dislike about state elections is when they are held. For example, federal elections have specified dates. I go and I know I'm going to elect a president. I go and I know I'm going to elect Congress. And then they just have like a bunch of random job positions that I've never heard of just intermixed in there. And yes, some of them I'll recognize, and some of them will be like, okay, I know what that is. But I feel like it's just throwing too much information at your face at once. I feel like if we want, and we've gone so far off topic, it's not even funny, but if we want more representative state governments, I feel like one step that we really have to take is dividing up when elections happen so that there is an election made specifically for state governments.
Well, I think if you reduce the role of the federal government involvement, that it will force the states to increase their role, and what will happen is the populations of the states will begin to pay more attention to their state government than they do.
That's probably also true. And I wouldn't mind that. However, I will say on the role of healthcare, and this does come back to what Obvious was saying earlier with Vermont, one of the reasons that their costs were so high is because a lot of healthcare companies saw that if a state could pull off single payer, it would be a threat to their bottom line. So they decided to basically boycott selling anything to that state. Now, this isn't as big of an issue for California because there's a lot of people in California, but a state like Vermont, which is like super tiny, it crippled under the pressure. So something like healthcare, I think, would have to be done on a federal level.
Yeah, as far as doling out the money and collecting the revenues, because that's the thing about the federal government. It's the ultimate revenue collector. That's why, and then that's why they block granted out to states, even though each state probably has. That's something I would love to know. Like, to what degree? Well, here in Florida, we don't pay state taxes. That's the thing. But I'm wondering
Don't
if
pay state income tax, right?
right, we don't pay a state income tax. But obviously,
Nice.
Florida, the state of Florida, is getting some revenue somewhere, and obviously they're probably just getting it from the corporations themselves. I don't know how much they actually set aside, in their own state budget for healthcare, and then they have the addition of what the federal government doles out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, most states, when they don't have a state income tax, have a property tax, and then also a state's higher than other states' sales tax.
For example, Texas also doesn't have a state income tax, but it has a sales tax. Actually, its sales tax is like 8%.
yeah, over here it's 7.5%, I think.
Which I don't know what the average is. I think that is roughly around average, though. I'll have to look that up.
Like 7%, 7 to 8.
Yeah, I'm just gonna Google
For a state tax or for a state sales tax. I think that's a bit high. I think most of them are probably around 5% or so. But then it goes. Then again, you're going to have, on addition to that, you're going to have city taxes and county taxes and all that stuff plays into. But anyway, we're getting sidetracked from where we were. I apologize.
Yeah, we are way off base.
No. Well, I know, and it's kind of hard. Like, I'm trying to think what would be the thing to keep us back on track, other than coming over here to the waste, fraud, and abuse. I think that's the very first thing. And like, I wonder to what degree, what's the best way to control that? Because if that is the number one problem, and I think I think the biggest driver of healthcare really is the waste, fraud, and the abuse.
Well, you could publicly audit it, but that would create a lot of cost within itself.
The only thing the government would have to come in and take control of prices to some extent. At least with the necessary services. Because this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where when you have a need for something, you will pay close to anything to obtain it. And I couldn't tell who was saying it, but with the clinic idea, the catastrophic clinic, this would be expounded even more, because now not only would you be willing to pay whatever it takes, but you wouldn't be paying it. So you would just go wherever you want, and they would charge whatever they want, and the cost would be completely disconnected from the individual.
No, the cost would have to be totally controlled. In that regard, from a clinic perspective, if you had some kind of government clinic, that would those costs and everything would be completely determined as far as how much you're going to pay the doctors, and everything else would be determined by some kind of centralized planning system, which is, once again, one of the reasons why I said if you can do it from a statewide level and you can get universities involved in it, right, to where it's part of their system for certification, just that people have to understand this is how these things work, then you can say, okay, you're only getting paid this amount for this work because it's part of your education that that the government is subsidizing, more or less, and the government is getting something out of that.
Well, yeah, but then the problem comes in that you are, not to say anything bad about people who are in university, and again, I've never been to a medical university, so I don't know how trained they are at what point in time, but.
Well, I understand that, but when you talk about the difference between where it's free and where it's not, we're looking at the difference between where it's free and the kind of care that you're going to get when it's free versus the kind of care that you're going to get if you can pay for it.
I would still say it would make. Here's the thing. With this, there is power in numbers, and this is why I say that at least the basic care should be covered on the federal level, even if the only price control that the federal government has is setting up an agency which has no legal right to force prices on people, it can only negotiate the same as a company would. It's just a company with the entire nation, that it has insured the entire nation. Even if that's all we're talking about, and just raw negotiating power, seeing what the price is.
You basically did that with Obamacare, and look at what it turned into.
Well, except there was no agency that negotiated the price.
Yes, there was. There was a federal government that set up there and said, these are what the costs are going to be. And then they said, these are how we're going to control costs, because we will have boards to determine what the raises of these costs are going to be, what the raises are going to be from these things. This is why a lot of insurance companies fled the market, because they basically said, we can't afford what you're telling us we have to insure this with.
Well, okay, that's two different things, though. What I'm saying, that is
it's really the same thing, because you're setting up a government board to make these kind of determinations.
Well, I'm not saying that it's a government board. Well, I mean, it is a government board. I'm not saying that this government board will have legal power. It will not have power to just from on high say, you will pay this much.
Okay.
Instead, it will be more like, how any insurance company would negotiate with any.
Here's what happens, all right? And I'm going to tell you a very specific thing.
Okay.
What happens is the government makes a decision as to say, this is what something's going to cost, and everybody will raise their prices to what the government pays. This is what happens currently with Medicare and Medicaid, and how insurance companies decide what they're going to pay and what they're not going to pay. Is they have a list from the government to know what procedures they'll pay for and what the ranges of those procedures that they'll pay for. And then they set their pay, what they'll pay out to the doctors along those same exact lines.
Okay. I still don't know, because one of the biggest avenues for waste is price gouging in certain medications. Like, for example, EpiPen going up like hundreds of percentiles. Certain medications price gouging people because they know because they know they have essentially a monopoly over it, or at least some sort of oligopoly or whatever.
Well, there needs to be, obviously, I'm not going to deny that there needs to be certain restructures in that. For one thing, I think that our patent laws, when it comes to certain things, need to be definitely readdressed. And patent laws for medicine is one of those things that needs to get fixed.
Fair enough.
I mean, I honestly believe that instead of, because of the necessity of drugs, of the pharmaceuticals, that they should only allow a patent for 5 years. But by the same token, I would also streamline and get the FDA out of the whole idea of saying we're the ones who are going to tell you when a drug is safe for use or not.
Well, the problem with that is you get the possibility of someone releasing a drug to market that is, by any reasonable standard, not safe for use.
Yeah, on that note, not to interrupt, because I know you guys are bantering back and forth, but there are plenty of drugs that the FDA has approved safe, and they turn out to be recalled later on because of unforeseen side effects.
I'm not saying the FDA is perfect, but some sort of regulatory agency that...
I'm not against regulation, but again, the problem I have with any government regulation is it may or may not be effective.
Well, some of those drugs were pushed through really quickly in their testing. So I don't think it was the FDA's fault. Also, I have a huge bias because my sister works there. Granted, she's low level, so I'm very FDA pro, but there's my bias.
Yeah, let me tell you, I've told Nachi this story, and I'll tell it to you guys. The FDA, all right, because of the regulatory bodies, when a medical company tries to put in a new product, for example, we worked with radiation oncology equipment, okay, and we had a computer, all right, that would do certain aspects of recording the radiation treatment. All right, now what happened is the manufacturer for the network card that was being utilized, okay, decided they were no longer going to make that model of a card. So we had to go through an entire 510K process again through the FDA, all right, with thousands of dollars, and over 6 months of once we gave it to the FDA, once we submitted for it, we had to do all the background work for it to submit it, and then once the submission did it, we put in the submission. It was 6 months before they sit up there and approved it for 510K use. That's the kind of overhead and oversight that you're getting from the FDA. Now, granted, this is not a pharmaceutical oversight, all right? But if you want to lower the costs, okay, to say that the government is going to be the arbiter of what's safe and what isn't, and they're going to be the ones making the determination, that's how you end up with this whole marijuana debate. That's how you end up with all these things, because they become the regulatory agency for it. Well, and I would prefer they themselves step back, and they can have a role to say, okay, we will be part of the testing process and say that they followed certain guidelines. But if that's all that they're doing is they say yay or nay, they followed the guidelines, but don't necessarily interfere with these things being done. And I think that's all that's necessary. I don't think you need the federal government making these kinds of decisions, because they do such a shit job.
So
in other words, kind of like a restaurant inspector, like they would almost be working like a restaurant inspector. I mean, at one point or another, you do need a third party, uninvolved entity. Like,
see, that's the problem I have with the FDA is without it being an independent agency, it ends up getting a lot of outside influence, and you end up with shit that's illegal and stuff that is legal. Like, for instance, fentanyl patches, which are very, very concentrated opioid. And it is good for some people who need it, but marijuana is illegal.
It's ridiculous. I feel like the problem here is not that regulation exists, more that the regulatory bodies that we have in the United States are corrupt as all hell.
Well, the purpose of the FDA initially was supposed to be, for the most part, truth in advertising. That you couldn't sell snake oil anymore and say that it cured, rheumatoid arthritis, when all it was, whiskey. All right. So it was supposed to be there to prevent people from being lied to about what these things could do and couldn't do. And I personally think that we need to roll back a lot of the FDA's decision making from an approval type of thing to a yes, this is right, or no, this isn't. For example, like United UL, you know how you get the UL on all your plugins and stuff.
United Labs.
Right. So you have something that says this is approved. This is UL approved. So like
a threshold rather than a accept or deny thing.
Right. Where they say, okay, we now approve it for this, versus, okay, we're the ones who determine whether or not you can even use such a product or not use such a product.
So basically you can put it to the market, but if it doesn't, we have to give it this stamp of approval, essentially.
You don't have to give it the stamp of approval, but you have to list whether or not you have this approval or whether or not you don't have this approval.
So would the product have to say not FDA approved?
Correct.
One of the biggest problems with
wait, I want to write this in here just really quick. Sorry. So MC, what you're saying, because I'm actually typing that into the document. In other words, you would try to limit the FDA's power, where they're more of like you were saying, a yay or a nay, and it's almost like ultimately all they really are doing is kind of giving it their seal of approval with those FDA things, but not getting so involved into the procedure where they're bottlenecking and stifling the innovation itself.
Right. More along the lines of, we agree or disagree with whether or not this this does what we say it does.
And one of the biggest problems with the FDA is there's no inner body of communication. For instance, there's a whole list of drugs in Europe that work that aren't approved here, and there's stuff that's here that's on the market that's not approved in Europe. I mean, there has to be data sharing, and the entire reason that they're not sharing this data is because of lobbyists. The cockroaches that created the whole problem in healthcare to begin with. Once you get rid of the lobbyists,
which is one more reason why you have to reduce the power and scope of the federal government, because then the lobbyists can't basically stifle this shit for their own freaking benefit.
Having a weak and corrupt government is still a corrupt government.
But the damage the damage from a weak government, however, is not nearly as great as a damage from a corrupt, strong government.
But there are some instances where the government does have to get involved, and in those instances, a corrupt government will always do a disgustingly poor job.
Well, I can't disagree with it, but if you put it in a state-by-state basis, at least the remedies can be done on a state level, which tends to be quicker than trying to move through, for example, anything through Congress.
Okay, and
I don't see any reason why a state-by-state basis wouldn't lead to just as much corruption.
Because
if you want a more,
the reason is because your oversight is more local.
And you also create more competition, and competition breeds greatness.
Oh, for sure. I agree 100%. Anything that is limiting competition and like that, like the American Medical Association, that's we got to figure out. You would have to figure out a way of how to lessen those powers.
Oh, and you know what? There's a 21-year patent on all medication, and that needs to go. Everything else is 7 years. Why is medication 21 years?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I want to reduce it to 5, to be honest.
I'm not against there being some form of regulation, and I'm not saying that the government doesn't have to play a role on some level as a population gets bigger. However, the thing about the government that we have now is it's so large and has its tentacles in so many things that there's more government than we need to run things efficiently. The medical industry is a great example of that.
It's like an octopus.
I would agree that the government
is like a dog chasing its own tail.
Things efficiently, but I think one of the problems that we're having is more so than it being too big to run things efficiently. It's too big in all the wrong ways to run things efficiently. If it was just as big as it was now, but it was, how do I put this? It was truly from top to bottom in every situation designed solely to, if the only goal of the government was democratic approval, then I feel like a lot of this stuff would quickly just be ironed out.
No, absolutely not.
Well, I think part of the problem, what I'm about to do is going to bark up an entirely different tree. Is part of the reason why everything is so slow is because our campaign cycles for everything at the federal level is way too long. If we had regulations like they have in Britain for their campaign cycles, where you're not allowed to put any money onto TV, money doesn't equal speech, and for certain elections, you're only allowed to politic about 6 weeks in advance, we'd have much shorter campaign cycles and much more media discussion and public awareness about issues rather than the next election, which I think is a big thing. But like I said, I know I'm barking up an entirely different tree right now.
That's good for a country of 65 million people, but we have 370 million people, and we're also 3 times the size landmass as Great Britain. I mean,
I'm not saying it needs to be 6 weeks, but I think there's definitely a happy median between a 2.5 year presidential election cycle or campaign cycle.
Which is once again one of the reasons why I say we have to reduce the influence of the federal government and increase state government involvement. Whether the states want it or not, they need to start taking back a lot of the power that they sat around and ceded to the federal government.
I disagree. I'm more of a federalist, but I think campaign cycles is would help a lot.
There too, man. Our election cycles are way too long. They become a circus.
I would say go even further than that. Not only would you limit them to, I think the longest I would possibly allow them is like half a year, but also as far as what you can pay for and what you can't, give each individual candidate a set amount of money and watch the amount and basically watch what they're spending like a hawk and force them to.
But how are you going to do that?
Very
The
transparent.
moment you turn your back, they're going to be knee deep in hookers and cocaine.
Well, but you also run the risk of denying people a voice, because then all of a sudden you're going to have people who say, well, this person who put up this, who paid for this commercial, okay, they're really in this candidate's pocket, so therefore it has to come out of that candidate's out of their budget, and so you're starting to stifle free speech. You got to be real careful with
that. You have those free speech vouchers like in Washington State, and those seem to be working.
The state level vouchers? Is one thing, federal level is entirely different.
Yeah, there's
this might seem a bit totalitarian, and I hate that I have to say this, but I would almost say that within that half a year period that politicians are actually allowed to do it, don't place heavy fines on any private entity that wants to try and support a single politician.
See, I disagree. So, in other words, you're stifling people's freedom of speech.
Only large companies and entities. Individuals can say
whatever they want. But that's the thing. Companies are represented. Companies are people.
They have their own agency.
Yeah, they have their own agency, and there are actual people behind the company.
Companies are made up of people. The people who make up companies can go do whatever they want. But once they're using company money,
are you going to let according to the Supreme Court, Google is a person. It is an entity. It has its own agency.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to say. I think we're trying to say we want to overturn that money equals speech, and we also want to overturn that corporations are people. I think.
Well, what about unions?
I'm not saying that people can't say. I'm not saying that people can't say whatever they want. I'm simply saying that you can't buy. I'm saying that you cannot pay for something that advertises for a political entity. So
okay, so money equals speech. We're okay with that.
Money doesn't.
Unfortunately, that's the way it has to be, because what are you going to do? For example, let's talk about like the Sierra Club. All right, the Sierra Club is just a nonprofit group of people that get donations to sit up there and push an environmental agenda. Are you going to say that they can't sit up there and run political ads?
No, see, the problem here is we have to make the word lobbyist as dirty as the word rapist. We need to make the word lobbyist as nasty and as disgusting as a child diddler. Listen.
I would much rather remove it from a federal standpoint and make those lobbyists have to deal with 50 individual states.
Yes, at a town hall meeting or something, and trying to pitch their idea to them instead of a single person who's going to turn a vote, and then let the people decide, and then let their representative know what they think.
That's a fair point.
Here's the thing. Then you just shrink the problem. You will have smaller companies paying their individual states to loosen regulations on them. And you say you have to deal with 50 individual states. If my company is only based in Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana and Florida, I don't have to pay all 50. I just have to pay 4.
Well, you have long-reach jurisdiction.
Well, right now you're only paying one, right?
So well, you have long-reach. You have longer reach jurisdiction in civil lawsuits that can take care of that really quickly. So I don't think it would be that easy if you went in an anti-federalist system that I think MC is describing. So I don't think it would be that easy. You would get tied up in civil lawsuits, and it would be much more difficult when you break it down like that. So I think that wouldn't be as big of a problem.
Once again, I'm not against the idea of an anti-federalist system. I'm just saying that the problem is not whether it's federalist or anti-federalist. I'm saying the problem is whether it's corrupt or uncorrupt, and whether whether private money is allowed to participate or not allowed to participate. For the sake of the sanctity of democracy, it can't be allowed to participate.
Well, while I agree with you, your comment to an extent, all right. The thing is that when you're dealing with a federal level, all right, where you have a concentration of power. All right, corruption in that regard is a heck of a lot easier because it's divorced from local oversight. It's a lot further away from local oversight. And the second thing is that becomes a concentration point of the money. If you spread that out into a bunch of different areas, yeah, there's going to be states that have certain areas that are going to be corrupt. All right, but the local people will be able to regulate that on a much quicker scale than, and it'll become more noticeable on a local scale than it will on a federal level.
And I'll give you a perfect example. Right here, local politicians in Philadelphia, just state representatives, 4 of them, they all went to jail for taking a bribe under $1,000. Now, push forward into D.C. Look at how many corrupt and disgusting things those people have done for a whole lot less, and they're not, or for a whole lot more, and they're not in jail.
Much in the same way that Nachi's kind of setting up this whole, is trying to actually write a healthcare bill, I have actually gone into depth and written what was probably about like 60 pages of like mock amendments to how I would thoroughly go through and fix this problem.
Hey, Nachi, when are you going to complete your manifesto? You Cubans are quite good at it, I hear.
Well, here's the thing. I was even wondering if this one, because I was dead serious of sending a tweet to Donald Trump of this video. But I'm wondering if maybe what I want to do is I want to go over this video and maybe do the next time around that we do this and have a clearer direction, because I think it's a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, I feel like I might have something.
Here's what I did want to bring up, because what I have right now on the screen is the document that MC gave me last time. And then I see here that because I think you took my document that I had and then you built on it, which is great. And I remember starting it with the major factors and players. Is this your priority? Like, would you say, okay, if the first thing we need to deal with is the health insurance companies, and then the pharmaceuticals, and then the American Medical Association, or?
No, this was my first draft to just start spitballing what I think needs to go in each area, as far as how to set up which areas should go first and how to prioritize what to fix. I thought that we could discuss that in like this kind of a forum where we could go by going, okay, what's most important in all these areas that we could start solving, and how do we draft from a prioritization standpoint the most important to the least important things to do in each area, and then see, okay, if areas that have multiple things like tort reform, okay, is it okay to have the area fixed here in tort reform in this regard, but not in this regard, and therefore what the actual result would be, right?
Right, because I see that, for example, tort reform, I don't know if you're looking at the screen, because I have it up on the screen.
Yeah.
The tort reform, you've got it like here under the health insurance companies and the pharmaceuticals. I thought that the tort reform was almost like something that would stand on its own, or that it would be definitely related to the doctors and the American Medical Association, because that's probably one of the biggest.
And pharmaceutical companies.
Well,
I
yeah,
think it should be its own thing, but it was a rough draft, like you said, from what I can tell.
Well, right, but the other thing you can look at it and say is, okay, if we come back with tort reform and we describe a broad-based tort reform, look at the bang for the buck you can do for it. All right, it puts as negative pressure on the cost across all these major players.
Oh, I see. Right.
All right, so that's another way of looking at it. I mean, I didn't have a 100% idea this is what this means here in mind. I was just trying to build upon what you had put and say, okay, let's take a look at it and break it down like this. How can we reduce prices? What can we do to reduce prices in these other areas?
By the way, from what you guys know, the Republicans are right now with the whole brouhaha with the American Health Care Act that they're trying to push. It's still just a bill for right now. Nothing's been signed into law, right? So as far as we're concerned, the Affordable Care Act is still the law of the land, right?
That is correct.
That is correct, yeah.
Still,
I think they might have actually abandoned the American Health Care Act just because.
No. Right now, the American Health Care Act is still in effect. The thing about the American Health Care Act that makes it very dangerous is, once again, the way it's written gives a lot of power to who's ever managing it in the federal government, both positively and negatively. Huh?
Well, it's just a bunch of placeholders and tax cuts.
No. Well, no. The who it goes after, the discretion given to the I don't remember who exactly it is, has a lot of discretion as to whether or not they want to enforce certain aspects of it or not, and how they want to draft these things. I mean, it's really
on at least one thing, not to interrupt, that Bernie Sanders is best communist.
say what?
Can we at least agree that Bernie Sanders is best communist.
If I had to be ruled by
yeah.
a communist dictator, I would want that communist dictator to be Bernie Sanders. Yes.
No,
I wouldn't.
I can't stand that guy, but yeah, I would definitely agree. He's definitely, yeah, he's got very communist Marxist ideas. I mean, I've literally heard him say that we would need to remove the ability to make a profit in the healthcare industry. And that just goes to show how short-sighted that guy fucking is.
And yeah, that's something else that a lot of people fail to remember, that you need to take investment and portfolio piles, completely remove those from health insurance companies. Those investments need to go somewhere else. It shouldn't be an insurance company's prime goal to make profit for their investors. Make profit for the company, but you can't put a 401k and bury it into a healthcare a healthcare fund. No more healthcare hedge funds. There has to be a bond market or something else that it can go into. Car insurance. Car insurance has been taking the place of health insurance for the past 15 years. Why not more car insurance?
Right. I mean, I don't have a problem with people making a profit. How do you call it, within the healthcare industry, as long as they're not screwing people over. And that's the thing. Like, the whole thing about, I don't see a problem with insurance companies trying to make a profit. That's understandable. The problem is when they start limiting the competition.
Exactly.
When they start like this, like right now, Mad Dodge, in the comments, but allow competition across states. Yes, of course, we need to have that, and that's, I think, what the problem is. That's where you start getting also that very tricky balance between what are you going to tell a company to do and staying away from it, and
see, this is my vision of healthcare. Completely break the government's back on it. Take their hands out of the pie. Put a shock collar on them. They can't even come nowhere near it.
Can I just butt in for a second? I just saw something on the American Health Care Act, and I'm reading Section 231, which is talking about the repeal of the tanning tax for indoor tanning services, and it is effective in 4 days. So at the end of the month, your tanning services will be at a lower cost. So Trump might be getting a fresh up for the, oh no, wait, it was, June 30th, not July 30th. So for about a month now, your tanning has become a lot cheaper.
Well, I think that's covered only for people with iron deficiencies and vitamin D deficiencies.
Nope.
And by the way, you said that's in the American Health Care Act, right?
Yep, for Donald. Just in time for the 4th of July.
But wait a second, I thought that it was just still a bill, so nothing's become a law.
Yeah, it's still a bill.
It passed the House, but it still has to go through the Senate and the President.
Right.
Well, it's going to, whatever gets passed in the Senate, if it doesn't match exactly what's in the House, then what happens is it's got to go to a conference committee. The conference committee will then come out with a bill that has to go back to both houses. Both houses then have to pass the exact same legislation, and then it goes to the President of the United States for signature.
Right, and I understand that, dude. That is what keeps us from having a dictatorship. I totally get that. That was the whole thing with the founding fathers and decentralizing power. It is amazing also how incredibly difficult they make it to solve problems that should not be that difficult.
Which is why I think it's faster to solve individual healthcare issues at a state level than it is on a federal level.
See, this is my ultimate idea for insurance. It needs to be like fast food. You need to be able to go anywhere, get it. And if you don't like it for that month, you can get it somewhere else. But you need to be able to get it quickly, cheaply, and everybody has to have access to it.
Well, there's the thing. That view requires such an obscene amount of competition that I don't know how you would build up that much competition.
State by state, not centralized.
Even within a state, you would need much more competition than just state by state by state. You would need and this is the reason that I'm in favor of more federalized healthcare specifically, because on a state-by-state level, there's only a few states with the population to withstand a group of health insurance companies basically saying, okay, we don't like the prices that you're setting, so we're going to boycott you for a time until you start using our prices.
But if you get rid of government regulation, credit unions can even get in on it.
Hey, I hate to interrupt, but I gotta go. Sorry, Nachi.
No, it's all right. I was about to wrap it up as well, dude. I was about to wrap up now and stuff.
Yeah, I've got some phone calls that I gotta make.
No, cool. Thanks again for jumping in. And by the way, just to let you guys know, since you're the only ones that really watch the live streams on Wednesdays, I actually got a job that I'm going to start next week, and the hours are a bit erratic. So if you don't
Congratulations.
thank you, man. Thank you. So instead of Wednesday night,
I just said congrats.
Oh, thanks, bro. So instead of Wednesday nights at 9, it's going to be a little random. It'll
Okay.
probably be here and there.
Right, cool.
So you'll just catch it if you guys are.
Well, just announce it on Twitter and we'll be here.
Yeah, cool, man.
I don't use Twitter, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Is it
Fun.
a good job that you got? Is it a job you're looking forward for getting?
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much information. Not that they're listening to this live stream, but just in case. And so whatever. It's yeah, and I finally got something.
Good.
And it's a job I enjoy and shit like that, so that's a good thing. But
That's what I was looking for. That's all.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Good for you.
It's not your typical 9 to 5. In other words, it's one of those that's like all over.
Yeah, I'm kind of in one of those right now for the most part.
Yeah, at least it's something you enjoy. It's not the dark side of a glory hole, if you know what I mean.
Only if I had government fucking insurance would I do that. But, so, hey, anyway, I'm going to be wrapping it up, man. Thanks again for you guys for jumping in. I'm going to try to figure out for the next time around that we do this on healthcare to have a little bit more of a structure to it.
You know what? Just get yourself an egg timer or like a wristwatch, and just give everybody 2 minutes to make their piece about whatever, and just cut them off at 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I had thought about that. I had thought about doing that. The thing is, sometimes it takes more than 2 minutes.
Well, you can always make the say, hey, this is interesting. We can extend it.
Yeah, true. But no,
just
man.
like general, hey, does anyone want to extend this? Honestly, I think that would be really great because I ramble a lot and I hate that I do that.
No, what I got to do is I got to stop being so polite, I guess. And I don't really mind if somebody's going to talk, let's say 3 or 4 minutes, as long as it's within the subject at hand. That's when it gets careens out of control when people start but it's understandable, man. It's and that's why I guess they become enjoyable too. So. But like I said, man, thanks again for you guys being. You know what? I'm not going to tweet this one to President Trump just yet. On the next one, I'm going to have it a little more organized.
You know what you could do?
That would be amazing.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to even tweet it at this point to Trump and say, look, this is how we're discussing this, and you can come and watch it, and then let people sit up there and put it out there, and let's see if people get interested in it to take a look at it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You guys are cool with me tweeting this out then?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I doubt anyone's gonna pick it up, but all right. Cool.
If someone does pick it up, even if Trump himself doesn't watch it, if other people pick it up and other people start watching, then ideas could get spread, and that would be great.
Well, if somebody comments on it, let other people sit up there and come back and say, well, this idea was dumb, and this idea is good, and just see if we can get more, a broader consensus, at least on the Twitter sphere, from a perspective to see what's going on with it. I mean, it's not going to hurt. It definitely is not going to hurt anything.
He's a dirty communist. That random.
That's what I was definitely going to put within the tweet is this is just the first draft.
Hey, Nachi, there's an old saying, when you're dealing with an impossible task or something that's extremely difficult, difficult takes a day, impossible takes a week.
Government takes 2 years.
Well, we ended on that, and like I said, man, thanks again.
All right.
Take it easy, Nachi. Good luck with the job.
Good luck. Have a great time, guys.
Me too. Late.
Bye.
Bye.
And that concludes this first draft. So for anyone who's actually listening, please feel free to even ridicule the idea. That's how we will find the solution, through the criticism. Thanks again for watching.